hope you all are having an amazing time at the New York Summit, and we're so excited to be here. My name is Jonathan Vogel, and I'm a developer advocate at AWS. I'm joined by my colleague Hamza, who is from the product team, who has led the effort on a neat new feature that he'll be diving into more details in a little bit. You are here because you've adopted cloud and you're moving quickly and you have a responsibility to keep reliability up. I'm here to tell you about a cool new feature that is launched today in the New York Summit keynote that we specifically built for you. I'm talking to my engineers out there, operators. Are you all able to hear me? Okay, awesome. Operators and my SREs, or site reliability engineers. Let's jump right in. And it starts with the why. Why AI Ops? And it begins with understanding the challenges that you all are facing day to day in IT operations. And you're looking for solutions. And these are the same challenges that we see that led us to developing this solution. And that's based on our experience, our customer feedback, and this feedback loop or flywheel, which initially enabled us to build and now continue to grow and evolve the capabilities of our fully managed AI Ops solution, Amazon DevOps Guru. We're hearing more and more from you out there and other customers moving to serverless architectures, looking to reduce the undifferentiated heavy lifting. And this can be an important foundation of your serverless architectures, how critical it can be to have an AI Ops solution in place to be successful. We're going to get into some exciting new things, including Hamza providing more details about what we launched today. And I want to call out something that how we work at Amazon. Over 90% of what we build is driven by our customer feedback. And I was in a similar position in April, launching AI Ops for serverless at a breakout session where afterwards I had multiple customers come up and ask, does DevOps Guru ingest logs? I'm looking forward to ingest my CloudWatch logs. And I knew what we were working on, but I had to keep it a secret. And it's even more exciting for me to be here today to announce the release of Log Analysis. In addition to that customer feedback, we also have been getting more and more customers asking for proactive insights. Loving our reactive insights, customers are finding it more beneficial to be proactively notified of an issue. And so I'm going to show you in a live demo. Hamza will show you the log analysis, and I'll show you a proactive insight that is new since the SF Summit. And we'll be available. We made some buffer time to be off stage to answer questions. So if you have any questions that you can think of about AI Ops, about Amazon DevOps Guru, as we go through this presentation, please make note. Also, if you have any feedback, especially if there are any services that you're using today in the cloud that you would love to have an AI Ops solution to help you with, we'll also be available for both those questions and any feedback you have about what you could look forward to in a fully managed AI Ops solution. So we'll start with those challenges. And going to our industry demands, we have this pressure, you all have this pressure to innovate faster. And in order to stay relevant and maintain business agility, we're seeing more and more people shifting their IT operations to leverage AI and ML. And application availability is becoming increasingly important as more and more customers are having this expectation that your application is available 100% of the time. And as we know, Werner says, everything fails, and that can be hard to achieve. And you have set up monitoring for this, but it's becoming increasingly overwhelming with the information overload. And I hear this phenomenon called alarm fatigue. Is there anyone out there in the audience that has experienced alarm fatigue? So I'll share a little bit about my background. I study computer science, and I They've been working professionally in the space of IT and software development since 2007. I have experienced some of these challenges, and we imagine many of you out there have experienced them too. So I got to build these cool manufacturing solutions, and I'm going to tell a quick story of one example where I led the development of a smart factory solution on a production line. And as the architect responsible for that relational database design, I made a big mistake. I failed to implement an index on a critical business table, which could naturally lead to some performance degradation. And this was okay in my testing and QA, but once it got to production, after a few months, my customer calls and says, "Jonathan, the system's running slow. Can you take a look?" And fortunately, in this case, it didn't take me a ton of time to figure out what the problem was. But looking back, I would have loved to have some type of solution that could have helped identify this proactively before my customer had a problem. And when I reflect on those times, I didn't have fancy dashboards. I didn't have complex alarm configurations. I often would go to the logs when I had an issue. So I would like to take a quick poll again. Anyone out there have a circumstance where your application's been down, or there's some software issue where it's a critical impact to the business, where you would have loved to have some kind of AI in place to assess and either proactively let you know before the issue happened, or reactively let you know about the context so you could more quickly solve the problem? And that's what's leading to the demand for AI ops. And so when we look at a traditional IT workflow, we have these applications, and we're seeing a shift towards more microservices-based architectures. So that means more applications, and they're generating a lot of data. And that includes metrics, logs. In the case of microservices, you might be leveraging trace information. And this is a manual setup, and it can be a heavy lift to configure. And when you set up these dashboards and alarms, you also acknowledge that software isn't static. Your resources are going to change. Your architectures are going to evolve. You're going to add new resources, remove resources. Perhaps not this week, but next week, you have a whole new customer traffic pattern that changes the whole way your system is leveraged and perceived by customers. And what about what you're not looking for? And going back to my point earlier around business agility and this pressure to innovate faster, you have a growing responsibility maturing your DevOps culture and this necessity to increase and accelerate this DevOps culture. That can lead to some gaps in your coverage. But you do have some automation in place. For example, you might have some automated ticketing. So when that alarm threshold is breached, automatic ticket is generated, and you or someone else, another human being, has to look and see, is that alarm really valid? Could it be a temporary hiccup? Do I have to go through the logs and make sure that what I'm seeing is actually backed up with some more data? What if you could use AI to add some additional intelligence to parse through all the noise and surface only the appropriate signals? In other words, use AI to detect behaviors that deviate from normal operating patterns so that you can identify operational issues more intelligently, also known as AI ops for monitoring. So we'll take a look at what you have today on AWS. And at the bottom here, you see some different AWS resources. Perhaps you spin up a Lambda function, a serverless compute component. You want to run some code in the cloud. And when you spin up that Lambda function, out of the box, by default, you're going to get what are called CloudWatch vended metrics. CloudWatch vended metrics come when you spin up that Lambda function without you having to configure anything. And these include things such as the number of invocations, latency, errors. You might take it a step further and configure some custom CloudWatch metrics as well. And then you also have CloudTrail for your history and accountability of your resources. If you're leveraging microservices, perhaps you're using X-Ray today. If you're running relational databases in the cloud, perhaps you're looking to optimize your database performance and you're using RDS Performance Insights, or PI. And all of this is a heavy lift to configure to make sure they're operating at your high standard. Your alarm thresholds, you're constantly adding resources as customer traffic patterns change, reconfiguring these alarms. And you might have CloudWatch dashboards set up today for 24/7 visualizations, 24/7 visualization of your operations. And you get to a point where this can exceed human scale. I'm talking about you. You've been doing good, you had been surviving, it might have been hard, but now you're looking for some ways to make this easier. And that's where we're seeing customers adding an AI ML layer, Amazon DevOps Guru, a fully managed AI ops solution to augment your IT operations and help make your life easier. No machine learning skills are required. The service is continuously analyzing and consolidating streams of operational data from the various sources that you see here, including CloudWatch metrics, and now CloudWatch logs, CloudTrail, X-Ray, providing you with a single pane of glass and dashboard to search for and visualize anomalies in your operations. And so we're getting feedback from customers that they would like more context around this root cause. When an insight occurs and there's different anomalous metrics contained in that insight, it might be nice to have some more information, such as logs. And we heard from customers that these insights are great, but sometimes I'd like to check the logs to make sure what I'm seeing is accurate, and I know precisely that I'm confident to move forward with these recommendations. And log analysis helps surface that by highlighting the root cause in a more accurate manner and give you more helpful context and troubleshooting anomalous application behavior. Additionally, log analysis makes recommendations more precise than we could have with only the metrics input. Using pre-trained models informed by years of experience at Amazon.com and AWS Operational Excellence, these models can help identify anomalous application behavior, such as increased latency, error rates, resource constraints, surfacing critical issues that could cause potential outages or disruptions. And it's super easy to get started. To get started, you provide guidance about your application boundaries. And in pure easy mode, you can one-click a button to enable this solution, and it will begin ingesting your operational metrics and now logs. Be mindful that there is some baseline to this solution. It's important to consider that there is AI and ML that needs to set a level set of expectations before you can expect any types of insights to occur. Expanding on that, monitoring all resources in your account, you may also specify specific CloudFormation stacks. So do we have any folks using infrastructure as code, perhaps using CloudFormation today? So with DevOps Guru, you can specify one or more CloudFormation stacks, or if you're not using CloudFormation, you can have a similar capability with AWS tags. And then DevOps Guru will begin automatically ingesting those metrics and logs. And with today's launch of log analysis, now informed by relevant logs around the time frame, leads to more precise recommendations. Just note that that baseline period, it can take some hours, up to 24 to 48 hours before you can expect an insight. And what's awesome is when you add that new Lambda function, or you modify that CloudFormation, or you add a new resource with the appropriate tag if you're leveraging tag aggregation, those resources automatically get picked up by DevOps Guru to begin ingesting the data. By reducing the noise and helping you focus on the high severity issues, the ultimate goal here, one of the main goals is to help you improve your application's availability, your operational excellence, and when that issue occurs, the mean time to resolution, or MTTR, preferably is as minimal as possible. And by providing you with that aggregated anomalous metrics and logs and prescriptive recommendations, it can help you reduce and have a quicker MTTR. I thought it might be helpful to share a little bit about how DevOps Guru is working underneath the hood. And so you have these data stores that are input signals to the ML models. This data is analyzed by DevOps Guru to look for that anomalous application behavior. And prior, we talked about CloudFormation as an application boundary. And that's helpful to aggregate your apps in order to help the solution aggregate those anomalous metrics accordingly. It can also be used from an event history standpoint. So let's say you happen to make a change to your AWS infrastructure via CloudFormation, and you push that change of CloudFormation, and coincidentally, a short time after that, your application starts behaving differently in an anomalous way. And maybe a coincidence, maybe not. In the case of it being an issue, DevOps Guru can pick that up, not only show you in a single pane of glass the various aggregated metrics that are anomalous for that CloudFormation stack, but also show you in an event timeline view that right before that insight occurred, or shortly before that insight occurred, there happened to be this CloudFormation event, and that can help you be able to relate. Maybe in this case, it's as simple as rolling back that change. And so when an issue occurs, DevOps Guru is able to aggregate both the relevant events and the relevant CloudWatch metrics, and where applicable, provides you with prescriptive recommendations that you might take to remediate the issue. With more on today's launch, I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Hamza to dive deeper into log analysis.
Thank you, Jonathan. Folks, before I start, quick mic check. Can folks hear us? Yeah, good, perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. So I think he laid down the context quite well. He's mentioned logs in a few specific cases with his personal story and kind of throughout the app and the DevOps Guru console itself. So great job, Jonathan, in setting things up. And now, before I go into the actual new launch feature, what I want to quickly touch base on is your serverless use case. So one feedback we've heard in the past 2 years or so is that folks want their serverless architectures to be always running, the app availability that Jonathan talked about. And when you think of a serverless architecture, what are you mentioning? Kind of, it's allowing you to build and run services without having to manage the underlying infrastructure. That's where AWS comes in. That's where DevOps Guru comes in. And what I want to mention on the serverless use case, and this will build into our new feature, is think of a system where you have an API gateway, you have a DynamoDB, and you have a Lambda function. So the Lambda function is kind of speaking with the DynamoDB, and you have API gateway in there for the architecture. That could be kind of having both static and dynamic content, essentially. Now, you have these kind of resources. What does DevOps Guru do now? It's going to ingest vended metrics, as Jonathan mentioned. We already ingest CloudTrail logs, X-ray traces, and RDS-PI insights. But what we're adding today is log insights and logs essentially from your CloudWatch. And so with that, I will kind of go into this new feature and talk about it in a bit more detail. So what is log analysis? What are we launching today? So in the past 2 years, the biggest feedback we've received from customers is that we want our recommendations to be a lot more precise, not just general availability over things, but be more precise. And in order to do that, your insights need to be more accurate. And the data we're providing at the insight level, it needs to be more accurate and more specific. So for metrics today, we do provide some information, but with logs, essentially, what we're going to do now is when an underlying operational anomalous metric occurs, at that time frame, we will go look at CloudWatch logs and find relevant CloudWatch logs groups, essentially. And once we've brought this over, we will look through them to find relevant enrichment data pieces. And so when I talk about enrichment data pieces, I am referring to keyword exceptions, format anomalies. So think your log formats, new formats have come in. Think of numerical deviations. So think of something which right after the log spiked up too much, we're calculating means, averages, things like that. And apart from that, you also have some new format issues, as I mentioned. So that contextualized data essentially will help you try to make the troubleshooting a bit more precise and the root cause more specific. And that in turn kind of helps us with the target recommendations, because our recommendations now are going to be kind of invited to you by not just the metrics, but the log details we found around that anomalous metric as well. And that's where the power now comes in, that we'll be providing more specific recommendations. So that being said, what's in the future? So today, what we've launched log analysis for Lambda functions. And in the future, as I mentioned on the serverless architecture, we plan to ingest log groups for your DynamoDB API gateway and be able to enrich much better insights and again, more precise recommendations. So with that being said, I will go into the next slide. And again, we work back from the customers all the time. So one feedback received, I've mentioned, is that precise recommendations. Another thing, like how do we make this log-based impact on first launch most impactful towards customers? So that's where we found that with serverless architecture, Lambda has the most kind of insights you want to look at. So think of durations, errors, latency issues and stuff. So we kind of wanted to cater around that. And the first recommendations that we're rolling out as well will be focused around your duration issues, your error issues. And when you think of duration, think of latency spikes, think of causes being downstream throttling, code deployments, cold starts, etc. And when I think of errors, I mean Lambda execution errors. And again, those can be driven by out-of-memory issues, timeouts, bad requests, again, code deployments. And so the use case that we'll look into will kind of surface some of these recommendations and like how logs are going to be helpful in a lot more way today. So with that being said, I will go into the log demo and we will switch over. Can folks see the screen? Okay, perfect. So what we have right now is, rather than going directly into the log new launch, I want to quickly set the expectations. So we're talking about Amazon DevOps Guru today. So this is your console home where you see all AWS services. You can click on Amazon DevOps Guru from here and go in the process of enablement, which Jonathan will be covering in a lot more detail towards the end of this demo. So I want to go into the dashboard view. So when you hit Amazon DevOps Guru, if you have it enabled on your console, this is what you see. And the dashboard is kind of like high-level overview. So think of your all the different applications you have across your accounts. So you're seeing the number of impacted applications. In this case, there are 4. You'll see the number of ongoing reactive insights, which are more real-time. And then now, as Jonathan will mention as well, we've started adding a lot more proactive insights, and you will see those as well. So with that being said, I want to dive right into it. I will go into an insight. This is a page where you see all the insights on your troubled application, essentially. You see reactive insights here, and you see proactive. I've set up one specific reactive insight for this account, which will talk through the log feature. So this is the main page that I'd love folks to bring in some attention towards. So what we're seeing here is going back to the serverless architecture. So the system setup here is your DynamoDB is trying to connect with your Lambda function, and you have an API gateway over there. And all 3 of them start showing this 5xx error. And what's going on? How do we kind of read this page? So this is the insight page. You see that API gateway 5xx error has occurred in the specific application titled here. You get a quick insight overview with a description of like the severity, how much time we're checking against, and what the status for it is, and how many applications in your account got affected by it. So with that, I'll kind of start going down and see what else, what other information do we have today on DevOps Guru. So aggregated metrics and the graph relevant section of it, I think folks have probably seen, the folks who use DevOps Guru today. We see a list of metrics over here. Now, the fact that I've told you guys today that we have launched this log script, the way I would read this is I will look into the metrics and see what's related to Lambda. And so if you scroll through this, the 4th item in there, duration P90, you look that the resource is linked to is called AWS Lambda. So this underlying operational anomalous metric that came up is a duration, which is likely linked to latency spikes in Lambda. So I got this brilliant information on the metric side. What else? As I mentioned, we've launched logs, so what's going to happen now? As I scroll down, I see this log group section, and it's pulled a relevant log group by sifting through all these millions of lines of logs on your CloudWatch logs, and it's brought a specific log group. So there must be some relevance to it. Now, if you notice the P90 duration spike up top, I look into the time frame of it, which is between 10:59 to about 11:08. I want to make sure that the log group detail I'm getting is within that, is overlapping the time frame, and it kind of does. It's between 11:03 and 11:04. So I'm curious to know what is it going to offer me. When you click on the barbell, we quickly show a sample summary of your anomalies detected in these log groups. And that's what's kind of showing you what is happening with this log model. Essentially, it's going through all the log lines. We tell you the number of lines we've kind of gone through and how many anomaly types we found. We're showing a format anomaly. We are showing a keyword token anomalies. And what I kind of want to mention is when you see exception keywords, it's usually pretty good because it will likely lead to a recommendation. And now I will go into view details to see through what information we're providing as enrichment data. And again, up top, you see a quick visualization. The purpose for that is the purple dots will reference the log anomaly type that came up. And if you see a gray dot here, it refers to a relevant event that has occurred. So think of code deployments or the root causes that I talked about. If you see that gray one linked to this, it can kind of tell you again what event is leading up to this anomaly. So with that, I'll kind of scroll down and talk through the actual anomaly and what we're showing in it. So the breakdown is, you have the log anomaly one. We show you the sample log message taken from CloudWatch, and we provide a deep link to go into CloudWatch for further details. Again, providing that comprehensive overview in DevOps Guru itself that you don't have to go to CloudWatch now. It's all from this console contextualized to that anomaly that came up. Now we're seeing why are we showing this? So we're basically mentioning for the first one that this is a new event type that has occurred, not seen in the past in your logs. And we're also mentioning the occurrence. So it occurred about 295 times. So 295 times we saw this sample log message in your logs around this anomalous time frame. So clearly there's something going on. Now, if I read through the log message, there's two key pieces of information I quickly see over there. I see DynamoDB, the word, linking to your AWS DynamoDB, and I see conditional check failed exception keyword. So likely those two things have something to do with the issue or insight at hand. And that is likely the case because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and see if there's any recommendations that got popped up specifically related to your logs. So if I scroll down, I will see a recommendation here called check DynamoDB conditional expressions. And that is the one linked to this log group. So what's happening here is that your Lambda function spiked because think of a line of code that is talking about a condition. So x is equal to y plus whatever. And in that condition, when it was calling DynamoDB, it couldn't reach it and there was a failure in your communication. That's what started causing the spikes on your Lambda. And that was the true root cause behind the duration latency spike we saw. So earlier on with metrics, you would see the duration spike and you would probably go fetch in CloudWatch logs on what is the true root cause. But now we're kind of telling you straight up that, hey, in your system architecture where you have an API gateway, Lambda, and DynamoDB, the true root cause, which is not a symptom, but the root cause is your exception in your condition that was trying to communicate to your Lambda. And with that being said, I will now pass it over to Jonathan, who will talk a bit about proactive insights, which are something we've been expanding on this whole year. And yeah.
Awesome. I could see customers getting a lot of value out of log analysis, and especially after continually hearing that feedback, it's so excited to bring it all to you today. I'd love to get into another use case here, and for that, I am going to showcase proactive insight. But before I get into the console and show you what a proactive use case might look like, I'd love to set up a quick story to frame where this type of use case would be relevant. So for the purposes of the demonstration today, imagine that you're an e-commerce business and a commerce startup, and you're offering lightning deals. And you're putting up your first sale with only 1,000 units available, and you're using the cloud fully serverless. And the back end behind that is a first in, first out queue for those orders to be placed so that there's equity in terms of when folks order, we can get the queue set up that Lambda can pick it up off the queue and begin processing those orders in a fair and timely fashion for your lightning deal. This would work amazingly, but a mistake was made. A human being made the mistake of configuring the Lambda timeout to exceed the SQS visibility timeout. This means you could end up in a situation where Lambda is picking up off the queue and it's still processing, and another Lambda function picks up the same thing and you're duplicating your processing. Now, you have systems in place to mitigate this from messing things up from the sale, but this is unnecessary compute. So it's by that fact alone costing you money by the second. In addition, this is a lightning deal. You want to be able to preferably sell out pretty quick and show the amazing success of your startup. And you don't want to further compound issues or potential issues by breaching thresholds or having duplicate Lambda functions that could lead to potential bottlenecks. Fortunately, you have DevOps Guru in place, and it was able to proactively pick up this circumstance. So I'm going to hop over to the AWS Console here. And as you see at the top, for folks that are using DevOps Guru today, this is what you would see with an opportunity to enable log analysis. But let's jump into this SQS and Lambda visibility timeout use case. So right at the top, the name of the insight is very explicitly clear on what's going on. The Lambda timeout has exceeded the SQS visibility timeout. Now, in the case of Hamza's example with the insight that he shared, you could see various aggregated metrics relevant to that application. For this example, the specific metric that's being identified as anomalous is the SQS visibility timeout. And so you have a clear understanding of that resource with a convenient link if you wanted to dive in more to that particular resource, as well as a timeline view with the duration over time of that visibility timeout. Now, that's helpful, but what do you do to fix it? So as you scroll down here, you could see relevant events if they were applicable. In this case, there aren't any. But we have a recommendation. And this is, again, this prescriptive recommendation to help you understand how to fix the issue. And it's calling out that you can change this timeout, and I'll bump up the text in case that is easier to read, as well as a link to the Lambda function in question for you to conveniently get to. In addition to, if you're not familiar with this example, there's a link right to the documentation for what you could do to fix it. So that's one of our new proactive insights. I'm excited to have been able to share that with you today, but let's go back to the folks that recall my story from earlier. So we're talking about log analysis, we're talking about serverless, we're talking about proactive, but I also mentioned different data stores like your relational databases in the cloud and optimizing performance with RDS Performance Insights. So in addition to those things, we have DevOps Guru for RDS, which launched at reInvent. And I'd like to show you that example where I had that pain. I was missing that index and my customer called after things were sluggish. What if I had a proactive insight or a reactive insight that could have identified that this performance impact is happening in my development or in my QA before it got into my customer's hands? So this is an example of that exact use case where you have a mission critical table for your business in a relational database, and you made the mistake like I did and you forgot to configure that index. So you can see here that, again, it might be helpful to bump this up for folks, so I'll make it a little bigger. It might squeeze things together, but I'll make it smaller if that's the case and it's inconvenient. But you can see here, it's calling out the database performance specifically. And it's saying that the load is unusually high, over 100 times what we would like. And specifically when you scroll down, not only do you see the time frame that this has been happening and the database engine that is specified, but you have the metric of the database load. And here it's calling out in big text, you're 106 times what we expect. And you have this graph view over time of the database load, the CPU. You may choose to configure how this graph is displayed with some of those options above, including the timeline. And when you scroll down here, you can pinpoint the relevant metrics, such as the running task and CPU utilization. And again, being able to assess that graph over time. But again, we're here to solve things. We're here to reduce that mean time to resolution, or in this case, resolving that performance optimization. And it's calling it out right here, where you have this ID that you might need to tune. And when you click on this recommendation, you can actually see the specific SQL query that's identified. So if you have a massive relational database and you see something slow, maybe you made that mistake of not configuring that index. If you have DevOps Guru for RDS enabled and you have that circumstance, you can see this type of insight and recommendation. So that's an example of our of a DevOps Guru insight. You might be wondering, how do you use this solution? How do you get started? So for folks that haven't used DevOps Guru today, this is what you'd see when you go to the console and you navigate to DevOps Guru and you click the Get Started button. And again, I promised, it's one click to enable. So you scroll down here and you see a lot of what we've been talking about already, like the analysis coverage. You can click Enable. And by default, it's going to analyze all resources in this account for the particular region that you've enabled in. And when you click Enable, it will automatically begin starting to ingest that operational data, metrics, logs. And if you choose, you also have the option to choose later, as opposed to specifying a specific entire account or region. You can specify, I only want certain CloudFormation stacks. Maybe this particular one is a really important workload for us to monitor. Or maybe these particular few are the ones that make up this workload that we need to have high availability and optimal performance. In addition, if you don't use CloudFormation today, you can achieve a similar effect leveraging AWS tags. And of course, notification. We're all about automation here in the DevOps world. So rather than having a display up in your office or in your home office monitoring 24/7 with DevOps Guru, it meets you where you are. When anomalous behavior is detected, when there's an issue, that's when you need to know, and that's when you need to take action. So we have customers that choose to configure simple notification service or SNS to automatically be notified with the relevant information when an insight occurs. So you can make that configuration here and click Enable to get started with DevOps Guru. And I'll go back quickly and show you what, if you were to have enabled it and you wanted to specify specific resources, you could go to the Analyzed Resource section here and make that configuration change under the settings. So what we're gonna do now is hop back over to our PowerPoint and we're gonna talk about some next steps. So now you know how to get started with DevOps Guru. I'd love for you to consider a critical workload. Of course, you can get started with a development environment, your QA, to test things out, to prove the concept, but you're gonna find more value out of those production workloads, out of the workloads that you really could value operational excellence or high availability or performance optimization. The workloads that you have that struggle where the reliability is constantly a challenge to keep up and you're looking for ways to reduce that mean time to resolve and aggregate anomalous data so that you can make your actions quicker to fix when things are broken. So again, I highly recommend you try it out in production. Rest assured, DevOps Guru is not modifying any of your AWS resources. When enabled, it is simply monitoring. It's ingesting that data to look for anomalous behavior. And only when that anomalous behavior occurs will it bring to you that insight for you to look into. And where applicable, provide those prescriptive recommendations. Just want to call out that when you get started, there is that baseline period. So give it some time before you can expect any insights. We'd love to hear from you. So I mentioned we'll do some feedback and Q&A over there. So if you had any questions that came to mind as we went through this presentation, Hamza and I are going to be available to answer those questions. if you have any challenges that you face today, or any particular use cases with certain AWS resources for which you'd like to see in a fully managed AIOps solution, please share that with us. We love getting feedback from customers. And as we've seen today, that's what led to log analysis, proactives, DevOps Guru for RDS, and continuing that flywheel and continuing to grow the capabilities of this solution. So I'd like to thank you very much for your time. You can reach out to us. We have our, I got my LinkedIn there. You're welcome to connect with me or reach out on LinkedIn. And also, Hamza and I both included our email addresses. So you're more than welcome to also just reach out directly via email, especially in case you have to go somewhere else and you can't make time to come up to us for questions. Again, we'll be available over that way. So if you'd like to find us, come ask questions, and I'll hand it over to Hamza to close us out.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think Jonathan gave a great kind of closing remarks. I'm going to keep it light, but just wanted to reiterate that we kind of work back from the customer, and what I want for folks to take out from this presentation is with DevOps Guru that we're building towards more serverless architecture, folks. We're building towards proactives. We're trying to incorporate logs and other data signals to make your insights, again, more accurate, deliver not noisy data, but information organized in a way that it is relevant to you, and that we provide precise recommendations. And would love for folks to kind of like come meet us and mention any use cases, especially with logs. We'd love to hear what next you'd like to see, or if there's something in the console experience that you thought, oh, I'd love to have it this way, or things you do like. So we'd love to hear on that. And feel free to connect with us over LinkedIn or reach out to us on email with your questions and concerns. Sounds good.
And please, we'd love for your feedback on the survey. So good or bad, please share any feedback you had about today's session. We'll use that to make this kind of content better for customers in the future.
Yep.
Enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thanks, guys.